Make sure it's muted on the Zoom. Well, now the Zoom, because they can hear you talk right here. This piece, see that's muted. So then, well, because one day this week we'll go through and I'll just make notes, step notes. I thought one of those gallery views put it like you wanted it. You didn't actually paint. Got an extra piece now. Let's remove all of it. Bigger view. It's bigger. She's been the speaker. Wow.
Time I need a motion to return open session. So we'll second. The motion is second. All in favor of the motion, aye. Opposed, like sign. The motion carries. This time we'll stand for the sign for our state police.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we're down to our personnel report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, at this time, I'd like to recommend the following exhibits for your approval. Exhibits A through F.
So,
Second.
motion is second for the discussion. Hearing none, I call for the vote. All those in favor, say motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
At this time, we're down to our ESER 2. Dr. Goodwin.
While Mr. Willard is coming up, just the fact that make a couple of comments. First is the ESER 2 plan, as you recall, goes back to February of this past year, which went through executives an idea of how many months it takes for that to work through process. it was done in, November, December. And so it's taken this long for us to get information and to begin to develop the necessary paperwork that's state law. I would remind you that ESER 2 is very sizable, but now we have ESER 3 that's approved in February. It is now on the way through the process. There are some things that we obviously want to do out of our ESER monies, but we have delayed them because we have ESER 2 followed by ESER 3, which is a much bigger plan. And not only that, but there's some mandates on percentages that have to be spent in certain areas in ESER 3. So as we look at this, I'm sure Mr. Willard will be sharing, we're putting this much in this pot, but we're only putting this much because ESER 3 is coming, or we put more in here because ESER 3 we're not going to spend as much in that area. So I would just, make sure that we all know that. This is short-term federal money. I would also say the FTEs tied to this money have to actually, as I mentioned in the memo, while we're scaling up in the FTEs now, we're likewise going to have to scale back on the other side of this because it's kind of a scary thought that the FTEs will be used during these plans. But, with that, Mr. Willard, I'll get out of here.
No problem. Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good evening. Good evening. As Dr. Goodwin mentioned, it has taken us a little bit of time to put together some priorities and identify needs that we wanted to address in ESER 2. ESER 1, when that came out, we did not know that we would expect in ESER 2 and ESER 3. It's on the way. So when we were looking at ESER 1 with the amount that we have there, and I'll remind you that was a little over $2.3 million. It was pretty well received by everyone that our need was technology. So it was very easy to go out and capture a lot of technology in a short period of time with those monies. And I'll remind you a couple of other things we spent that on. PPE, the items that were not covered by state monies. Again, technology devices, contracted services to help deployment of devices, and then some protective monitoring services for everything that's being added. So a lot of that was focused on technology with some other, a few other items in there. So as we move into ESER 2, one thing I want to reiterate, you start talking about this pot being $9.5 million on top of the 2.3 we had. Please keep this in mind. All of these ESER pots of money are reimbursable. We do not get $1 until we spend it, we report it, then we claim it. So I mentioned this, and I'm going to mention this a little bit later on, but let's go ahead and put it out there. ESER 2 plus ESER 3, we anticipate $30 million. 9.5 now, 20 plus coming at some point in time. So over a period of time, as you see, ESER 2 is available to spend through September of 2023. ESER 3 will be available for one more year through September of 2024. So you start putting all those types of monies on a relatively short timetable. We're having to front a lot of money in a short period of time. So please keep that in mind. ESER 2 has the same available activities to spend as ESER 1, but what was added were items for facility consideration with regard to air quality and mitigation of risk for transmission of COVID-19 or other communicable diseases. So keep that in mind as we look at the ESER 2 information. So with those basics, do you have any questions going in at this point?
Do you think we'll need to borrow or some kind of plan for is coming up with money to be able to spend money?
I do believe that with the way that we will be able to plan out the expenses that are related to the ESER 2 plan, we start talking about FTEs, which are payroll items or monthly items, we'll be able to spread those out. We're not sure yet exactly how the facilities
projects that we'll mention a little bit later will line up. We'll just have to see how that works. But if we continue to look at the possibility of our TAN program going into the next year to help us with the cash flow, that would be a positive. That would be the best place for us to start.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about, having cash flow to be able to continue to do the projects and support the district.
At this point, we do not have any concerns, but our bond counsel and our financial advisors are very well aware of what's coming to all these districts. So they will certainly be addressing that through the summer as we look at the sizing of our schedule project.
So that reimbursable timeline, how quickly, once we make spending, can we fill out the application, do paperwork, and get reimbursed for that spending?
In theory, as soon as we pay the invoice, we can make a claim, but we will probably target doing claims at least quarterly. If we can do them monthly, we will do them monthly, but there is a ton of red tape and paperwork that's got to go into this. There's a human capital problem to do that we have to talk about addressing.
And I guess I'm saying reimbursement of the money once we go through paperwork, red tape, and all that stuff. Are we talking, do the necessary paperwork, get reimbursed in a month, or do the paperwork and still delay before the reimbursement happens?
There's really no delay. Once, if we get approved for a reimbursement, we can reasonably expect to receive the dollars in about 2 weeks. Okay, so let's jump right into the different categories. You'll see four areas of slides. We'll start with the curriculum area. With the challenges as far as students being in school and students receiving everything that they should during the school year, we are, like many districts, trying to ramp up our summer school program. So we are setting aside up to $180,000 of the ESSER 2 program, the ESSER 2 funding for 1 year to help with the cost of personnel, primarily personnel and fringe for the summer school program this summer. And again, part of the why it's only for 1 year is we know we have the ESSER 3 coming, and we have other areas we want to address with ESSER 2. We talked to you a little bit coming to this point about our CERDET program, the 4K program. Statewide, there was a noticeable loss in enrollments in 4K. We're no different. We had about a $500,000 adjustment at the 45th day count that was taken away from the original allocation of the CERDET program. So allowance under continuation of operations, we are requesting from state that they approve us to shift expenses from the CERDET state line item over to the ESSER 2 line item, and in hopes that we will recover the enrollments in the coming year for 4K. COVID really did a number on all 4K programs across the state. We fared better than most, a little bit worse than some. Dr. Goodwin mentioned some things that are going to be required to happen under ESSER 3. This gets into that area, and we want to get a start with that through ESSER 2. We're going to target 12 remediation FTEs for a period of 1 year. About $891,000 is estimated for areas such as reading recovery, literacy, math, science, other intervention areas that the curriculum department will be identifying. Those would be 195-day employees, and again, for 1 year. ESSER 3 is going to have a requirement that, Dr. Gilman, did they say it's 20% or 21%?
21%.
21%. When we receive all the guidance on ESSER 3, 21% of that funding will be required, it is required to be spent on remediation. So think about $20 million. You're looking at between $4 and $5 million of that money that will have to be spent on remediation. In order for us to effectively do that, we need to go ahead and get a start for 1 year out of the ESSER 2 funds on remediation. And it's not just because of the funding or the requirement in ESSER 3. We need it. Remediation is needed. There's a lot of lost time, and there are children, there are students out there that need the help as quickly as we can provide it. We don't know how realistic it is that we can get 12 remediation FTEs by the beginning of next school year. That's our target. We make it half, we make it a little less, we make it a little more. That is our target. Dr. Goodwin, would you like to add anything regarding that remediation requirement or our plans for the upcoming year?
Well, I would just reiterate what you say about the target, because remember that's 12 new FTEs. So if, say, any of those folks come out of our current teacher pool, we have to replace those folks. And with the tight teacher market, it's not, it may not be possible to fill all 12 because we may not be able to pull 12 people from other jobs. So, that's a real concern. That's also why we're starting this endeavor with ESSER 2, is because then when we get into ESSER 3 and we ramp up even more, we couldn't ramp up and say we're going to pull 22, say, with, at ESSER 3, because there's no way we can fill 22 months.
And this is going to be time consuming. It's going to be a lot of work for multiple departments. This is federal money, but keep in mind we have other pots of federal money that fund interventionists currently. We can't interfere with those plans. We need to make sure we're utilizing this to the district benefit where we're supplementing those programs. So we have to be very careful when we identify existing people within our workforce.
So we're going to be looking at this is 1 year worth of funding from the ESSER 2, and then up to 3 more from the ESSER 3. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So then after the 3rd year, we're looking at, if we pick up a dozen, we'll be having budgeted another almost $1 million for those.
Actually, we'd go the other way, though. We would have to ramp back down. It would be unrealistic for us because the final number is not going to be a dozen. The final number is going to be much bigger than that. So it's unrealistic to think that we could, as you say, have general fund come up $2 million extra a year to fund all these positions. It's just, that's unrealistic.
Is it required to, or is it recommended to have 12 remedial specialists? Or can we fund some other remedial project other than 12, or can we do a combination?
Well, this is a combination. This is reading recovery. This is other literacy intervention, math intervention, science intervention. So it is a across the board.
Well, and I guess I'm asking a question along, so forgive me, but what if I wanted to engrave or integrate some kind of technology with it? Like, let's say that I'm looking at maybe having 8 intervention specialists, some kind of computer software that would aid in helping the teacher or the instructor with some of these.
Actually, quite interesting. The state is doing the funding on that side of it. Ms. Folsom, which is the one that they just rolled out that they are funding? Dreambox. In other words, the state, keep in mind, they have 10% of this money statewide, and they'll have 10% of the ESSER 3 money statewide. They're looking for places to spend it. So on our behalf, they are doing just what you're mentioning.
Okay. And I guess from my perspective, we talk about student population continues to decrease. I think the market is getting much more, what do you want to say, challenging because of either online school and private school. Any other avenue that's available for kids to get learning as opposed to standing classroom.
Yes, sir.
Plus with technology driving us into the next millennium, so to speak. If we have another pandemic or something similar to it, that we have to go to a virtual platform, is this money going to give us flexibility? I think I heard you say maybe the additional state fund is going to look at creating some increased use of technology To supplement, okay.
Yes, sir. And again, let's not forget, when ESSER three hits, you've got $4 to $5 million must be spent on the same area. That could be people, that could be software, that could be anything that deals with lost time for education. Remediation is a broad term, so the fact that we're just doing FTEs as a shot in the arm here is just for this particular spending plan that we've submitted to the state. This is, we've got a lot of dollars still to spend in this area.
Well, I'm very impressed with flexibility. As I said, I think the next challenge going forward is being able to offer that virtual atmosphere where it's just as or even more effective than what it is, face-to-face environment.
And I don't think we disagree, but I think our State Department is very vigilant on a 5-day face-to-face education. So we're attacking what we know we need to attack at this point.
When we go after these future FTEs, will we maybe target some of these recently retired teachers that are maybe going back to working retirees? Since it is going to most likely be temporary positions, let's say temporary for a couple of years, we go after some of these working retirees instead of shifting a classroom teacher to an interventionist. Maybe a working retiree could fill an interventionist spot for a few years and they're ready to retire.
Well, and I think you know that's what we currently do with the number of interventionist spots is that we have retirees, yeah, and in some cases they fit, and in some cases they don't. But that has been we have a lot of, well, not a lot because we just lost some, but we have a lot of piece of retired FTEs that are very beneficial for us, and we'll continue to keep those active.
Question, what was the summer school? I noticed that $185,000 that is linking the entire area.
Yes, sir. But that is supplemental to all of the other summer school money that we've gotten from the state. So that's just on top of everything else we get: summer reading camp money, other participating summer school money, and all of that. So, but it is actually K through K4. 4K through high school.
It's not a big spread out throughout the county.
Yes, sir. We will do satellite sites like we've done in the past in each community, so that we were able to limit the amount of extra travel we had.
And we can't promise you that this 180,000 will be spread, but everything together, this being supplemental, everything together will be adequate across the district. Any other questions related to curriculum? All right, moving on to technology. So we were, as we finished up the ESSER 1 spending and purchases that we were doing for technology devices, there was not enough balance left in the ESSER 1 pot. So we have to do a continuation of where we're setting aside the amounts you see here, a little over $484,000 to finish the POs where we had encumbered those devices. So I have on here devices to be delivered. We've had this created for a couple of weeks now. As we've been rolling this out, talking to multiple departments, I think we've actually made progress on receiving those since then. So we'll be paying those out soon. So no matter the money now. What's that coming out of? That money coming out of now? Yeah, what is it going to come out of? What's that money coming out of? Yes, but that balance, the 484 is ESSER 2. Okay, that's one that's, yes, thank you. Yes.
So once those devices are delivered, we have devices for fourth grade on, is that right?
3 through 12.
3 through 12. That's it. That's one for every student. 3 through 12.
Yes. Another initiative that we're including in the ESER 2 spending plan is active panels or smart boards, as you may refer to them to for the classroom. We are setting aside $500,000, which will acquire approximately 122 to 125 of those active panels, which makes a big dent in what we need for the remainder of the classrooms. Probably leaves a couple of hundred, maybe
Maybe even less
classrooms that need to have those active panels in them. So we're going to give ourselves another shot in the arm, which is not only good for the classroom instruction, let me remind you, it's good for contacting those students, doing education virtually. Probably one of the best ways to do it is through those active panels. So the next item, I'll take you back. Can't remember when, I think maybe the January work session, where we spoke about the needs for the technology department / curriculum needs for rolling out or deploying educational technology. It was presented to you that evening for multiple FTE needs in the technology area for us to deploy effectively and for us to sustain the instructional technology that was being rolled out. So as luck would have it, ESER 2 has rolled around and presented that opportunity for us to give ourselves an advance on that and not have to worry about it in the short term, but it's sustained. So we would be targeting, and I would mention this particular bullet could easily go under the curriculum slide, because this is as much related to curriculum as it is technology. We would be targeting 4 technology integration FTEs. These folks would be tasked with making sure that those folks, those teachers, those folks who have the technology in their hands to use for instructional purposes are well equipped to do so. Training, PD, the ones who would be your go-tos, knowledgeable of the software and the devices. So those would be targeted for 200-day employees. This would be funded for 2 years out of ESER 2. $648,000 would cover the salary and fringe escalated for those 4 FTEs for 2 years. In addition, we will be looking at 4 engineers. These are the folks who are out in the district, making sure the devices run, make sure that they're safe, make sure that we have as little downtime as we possibly can. We have some of those, some of the best on staff right now that just can't be everywhere they need to be. So with more devices we need to support. These would be 240 days.
Question.
Yes.
When it comes to the engineering and the integration part, what about our infrastructure? Will we ever do anything with our technology infrastructure?
We will, not as part of ESER 2.
This is, if you recall, E-rate 2, about 5 years ago now, was how we targeted our paying for our infrastructure upgrades to where we are now. This is our year for E-rate 2 again. So we will be changing out all wireless access points in the county again, doing all the switch upgrades that are necessary. So we actually get a full refresh on our backbone.
And I asked that because with all this devices and smart devices, I'm sure we won't have the infrastructure to be able to keep up with that pace. We won't have this.
Right. We were just very fortunate, just don't look, that this happens to be on the E-rate 2 federal funds.
And that's the federal funding year. So those won't start rolling until late fall, correct?
Exactly.
So it's in October. So that'll be an October 1 rollout for the start of those ones.
And this would allow all of our students, for us to get as a basic infrastructure, they can be able to do, like those smart panels you talked about, the factory panel. This will allow our technology to be able to kind of run smoothly without jamming out, for lack of better words, freezing, installing and stuff like that. Does that make any sense from us? In terms of the infrastructure.
Yes,
I know we got a bunch of new devices, and of course, with upgrades, and be able to run that technology, the infrastructure, definitely have capacity to do that. we gonna be in good shape.
Yes, I reached out to the State Department today, a guy by the name of Andrew Epstein, just to make sure when I signed off on the bandwidth that we currently have, that we were gonna be okay. And so I wanted to put that in front of him, and he wrote me back and said, "You look good now." And I said, "Okay, we're gonna go with it, but if something changes and we do get some snags with that, Reverend Coleman, I believe we can request for more bandwidth from them."
Well, and my question to you, sir, school-wide infrastructure, is that what you're really talking about? County-wide infrastructure with the schools, or are you talking about in the communities as well?
No, just within the schools.
E-rate 2 is not, that's another federal pot, and that can only touch our locations.
Only
So
the
one of the
schools.
big issues was having access at some of the outlying communities within counties. But it's limited to the school towns.
I'm gonna say by looking at that those 8 positions will be a recurring position. Is that correct? You don't have to have that past your 2 years with the amount of devices that, so we've got.
I would think so. And if we have no reason to believe that we can't get another year out of ESSER 3 for these positions. So, we're going to be talking about sustainability for some of these that we're talking about this evening, and that's something we've got to work on as we go through the next 2 to 3 years. So we'll definitely be looking at that. And as far as the engineers, one of the things we benefit from now is we do have a couple of contracted service personnel who have helped us with the rollout and deployment now. We just simply need to add to that. So we do foresee this engineering line being a combination. We say 2 FTEs, we say 2 contracted services, 3 and 1, 1 and 3, so whatever works out as we go through the process. But we've had a lot of good success out of those over the past several months.
But by adding these 8 here, that's gonna be enough for you to be able to service everything you do.
That's based on what we're being told. Remember, we haven't done it.
So any questions about the technology slide?
E-rate come in next year, we will be all in the school, in the state, centralized area. Technology without schools.
Yes, sir. Our school infrastructure, we've been doing a good job of maintaining. It is time to change out wireless access points and go with the newest version and all of that. But we are in the hope is that the E-rate 2 continues so that 5 years down the road, we can do it again.
All right, let's turn the page and look at some operational items. ESSER 1 had 12 activities for allowable spending. ESSER 2 has 15. As I said, it opens up some areas where we can address facility needs, but they have to be tied to air quality. They have to be tied to mitigation of virus transmission, all of those things. So when you start thinking about the things you can do operationally, we have to make sure we can tie back to that. Leaks, moisture issues, age, that is not having a unit working efficiently. So we can't just go out there and do whatever we want. When we talk about the operational side of things, OSF is going to be involved. We can't touch one unit, we can't touch one floor, we can't touch one wire without having conditional approval from the state and getting approval through OSF. They have vowed to streamline that process, and they have vowed that they will have extra people, third party, doing some of these approvals. So we need to, we're in the process of working on priorities and needs and putting some things together that we need to address. From a general standpoint, with air quality, we have an opportunity to do some really good things when it comes to HVAC. We've got a lot of aged units that are not efficient. They have possibly poor air quality running, going through the buildings. We just have to address those. $3 million set aside does not mean that that's going to be replacing units in whole. We may be looking at some air purifications, attachments, etc. This gives us an available portion out of ESSER 2 that is now remaining from what I've showed you to give us a good shot in the arm for HVAC. We will be determining what our oldest units are. Mr. Hammond and his team are going to be doing some identification. We have a chance to address some HVAC units. $3 million, I'll go ahead and tell you, doesn't get us very far through the district. But we will identify everything that we can, and we will attack everything that we can with regard to that. Again, we're not sure what OSF is going to require of us, so we're not sure at this point what sites, locations we can touch. You may have one school that you need to touch 20 units. You may have one that you only touch 5 or 6. But when you start touching that many units, they're going to tell you it's a system. You can't just do normal repair and maintenance. We have to do a capital assessment for that. So,
And
it's going to take some time.
we actually have to go through the procurement process to have a mechanical engineering firm on, retaining. They have to do actual plans and prints, and those have to be stamped. So we are about to go through the process of interviewing any potential candidates on mechanical engineering firms, and then naming one procurement to be in charge of this project.
So pretty much the same story with flooring. It's $1 million to address those flooring needs. We're not looking at any big areas of flooring or any one big location. We're looking at what are these classrooms, what are labs, what are media centers, what are these small areas we can tackle to remediate some moisture issues, address aged carpet as possible. Again, we're waiting to see what they say. Just because you have worn carpet that's aged doesn't mean we can replace it under this plan. You have to tie back to air quality. Are you creating a healthier environment? Are you mitigating risk of virus transmission? It's not, is it a tripping hazard? So we're playing by their rules. We feel like $1 million set aside will help us take care of some flooring issues. Custodial supply and equipment. Quite simply, we know we've got vacuum cleaners out there that need to be replaced. That qualifies because we can keep a cleaner environment if we have those. As I said, the State Department is not coming up with any additional money for sanitation supplies, chemicals, PPE. So we can help ourselves to make sure we have ample supply to create a safe environment. Roofing needs. We know that we have leaks, et cetera, out there that can be addressed periodically throughout the year. This is not a lot of money. This is not going to get you a substantial size roof. That's not our target. We want to identify and attack the areas where we know we have real issues, leaks that we need to address to create a safer environment.
Do we have any feedback on what we're getting from the state in terms of capital improvement, and are we considered as a disadvantage addition?
At this point, there are no funds coming to us for capital improvements like it was 3 years ago. And based on the language, I would not anticipate us being considered disadvantaged at this time because it says the districts on those lists must be 5,000 or less
5,000
students or less.
I didn't see the students, but I thought it involved all of the school districts that signed that
Abbeville case.
Right.
That was the funds we got 3 years ago.
This $100 million that they're talking about now is not going to be.
A lot of that's related to consolidation.
Most of that is related to district consolidation. They
Is that
give
right?
districts money and incentive to consolidate.
Okay.
We're not throwing in the towel yet, but we're not expecting. Any questions on the operation? Okay, so grants management, we think Dr. Goodwin has spoken to you all about the need for us to make sure that we are compliant, make sure that we're doing the reporting in a timely manner. Dr. Chapman making sure that we can get those funds in here as quickly as we possibly can based on the reporting and claiming. This is what that addresses, along with the management of the FTEs that we're adding. We're going to need a couple of FTEs at the district level to make sure that we handle $30 million the right way. And ESSER 2, we'll get an ESSER 2 for 2 years of this. Get a couple of 240-day folks at that level who can make sure that we're getting the reporting done, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, so that we do not get in federal trouble. And we're allowed to charge indirect costs for any expenses that are non-capital related. So I do have written into the plan $350,000 that we can recoup from the ESSER 2 money, which can go to the general fund side to help offset at least a small portion of the expenses that we talked about, and it could be related to this. That is $9.5 million that has been put on the spending plan that we have submitted to the state, and we are awaiting their response. I'll be glad to take any questions, or we'll be glad to take any feedback that you have regarding that. Early on, when these were first going in, you had some districts getting responses in about 48 hours. As they've gotten some in batches, we're seeing a week to 2 weeks at this point. Any questions?
As far as the last two on the management, are y'all looking, I know you get two now, but as far as grant management, are you looking for someone like that is sudden, or y'all looking for a parent?
My preference is full-time.
Full-time for probably 3 years. Just asking. All right, no other questions? Okay, what you got?
That's all for the ESSER 2. I'm still on for the next one, I believe.
And financial report now.
We're gonna be up here much more than I want. We'll try to get through the rest of it efficiently. All right, item 8A, we brought to you on March 29th a proposal, or we brought to you information regarding the retroactive catch-up lump sum step that is mandated of us for the 2021 year. And we brought to you information regarding the cost for those certified categories that were in the law or in the bill. And we brought to you information on cost associated with all the other classifications for that retro step, and reasons that we felt that we needed to consider that to include avoiding imbalances of schedules as we look to future step determination, as well as making sure as we get into uncertain times, not knowing what the state's going to do to address some salary schedules, this would be a great help to us. So, Dr. Goodwin, I'll certainly allow you to elaborate on that or mention anything that you would like. We certainly, the administration does bring the recommendation before you to extend the retroactive step to all employee classifications.
I think as we mentioned back in March, the cost being the approximate $275,000, we do believe that that money is available in this year's budget. That does not create a financial issue for us. It does address all classifications of employees that are eligible for a step. Of course, if it's somebody with 28 years, they're not going to get a step because they're out of chart, but it does address all of those others. I would tell you that the step is not equal for whatever position you might be in, and that is just the nature of it. Some people will see a very small step, some people will see a much larger step, depending on where they are even in the teaching chart. And if you look at this chart that Ms. Willard put before you, you'll notice that, 0 through 5 for teachers, it goes up very little each year. But then if it was, say, year 10 to year 11, it's a pretty substantial increase. So, but people will get the step that they are entitled. But the administration would recommend approval of the retroactive step be extended to all employee classifications.
Did I hear you say for persons at 28 years, they would not receive the step?
That is correct.
How much are we concerned in terms of?
Well, our teacher schedule only goes to 25 steps. That's the way it's always, been for quite a number of years.
They would not have received the step if this had been done on time within the 2021 year. This is not a special situation. This is just retroactive to what a normally step would normally be, based on normal eligibility.
And is this only for Chesterfield County or just statewide? The step increase is necessary.
There's a statewide mandate for those classified categories that were in the law. That's for everybody. That's for every district.
So every district has been behind 2 steps.
No. This is, when we came into 2021 under the continuing resolution, no one got a step across the state. This is making up 2021 step that was missed only that year.
We accept it as a plan.
Second.
I'll make a motion, second floor, any discussion? Hearing none, I call for vote, all in favor, say motion, let's see, let me know, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you. As Dr. Goodwin mentioned, the printout that we put on your table, if you take time to look at that and have questions, please ask, bring those to Dr. Goodwin or myself. Be happy to talk through it. He is correct. The FY20 schedule, it was built to accommodate. You remember us having to get starting pay of $35,000 back in the 1920 year. The State Department had to manipulate the state minimum schedule for the EIA supplement. So that EIA supplement for the first 5 years actually goes down. So those first 5 years, when we do this retro step, please understand, there are teachers who are going to be getting a very small step compared to that person who is in year 6, 7, 8, and all. Okay? I just want to make you aware of that. But we are bound by the statement. Okay. All right, moving right along. Switch gears one more time. We'll talk about the upcoming 21-22 budget. I got control again, right, Dr. Ray?
Yes, you do.
All right. It's hard to believe the last time we talked, we did an April work session was 2 years ago. We were developing the 1920 budget. A lot of things have changed. I will tell you, from the legislative perspective, going into 21-22, there's not a whole lot of challenging things that we're going to have to talk about. However, the challenge comes in the fact that due to the things that have been pushed upon us and all other districts in the meantime, and all of the very unexpected occurrences that have impacted finances and personnel over the past year and a half. So what we're going to look at tonight are the things that we're aware of through the Ways and Means or the House version. They were identical. The House just took the Ways and Means version and ran with it very quickly. And we're going to share some things with you, some insights of what we think is coming. So one of the things that we need to do between now and first reading, or at least first reading only shortly thereafter, is identify what our starting point is from budget standpoint. Going into a continuing resolution that lasted the whole year is very different for all of us. So we need to pinpoint where we're starting from. We're gonna let you know this evening what we know. So some statewide budget data that you've already seen. Weighted pupil units, the only change here from March 29th, state weighted pupil units went up by about 5,000 additional anticipated units. Of course, base student cost is not fully funded. If it were, we'd be getting 3140, but we're at 2,500 on the Ways and Means projection, so $11 increase. One other difference from March 29th, the VEA had not revised their estimates at that time. They came back within the past week or so, and the VEA estimates an additional $1.7 billion to be considered for the 21-22 budget. You can imagine that not a lot of that's coming to K-12 education. So we'll do the best we can, and we'll talk about everything that is coming to us. We'll be very thankful. Reminder that the 1% retirement increase for employers for 21-22 will be fun. Good slide, just as a reminder where we stand on local supplements. If things ever go our way in the budget season, we'd love to address our local supplement teachers. We'd love to raise that above. We'd love to go more than 5% above the state minimum. But we just haven't had that flexibility to do so with everything being considered in budgets in the past several years and the mandates. You see how we stack up against some neighboring or very similar districts, as well as the average teacher salary. Remind you that the average teacher salary is factored on a lot of variables. You can see, we compare to Newberry, we're at 5%, they're at 6.5% of supplement, but their average teacher salary is actually a little bit lower than ours. So we can assume, for instance, that their workforce, teacher-wise, has younger employees who are lower on the salary scale. So a lot of things to consider there. Some of the most recent newsletter updates for the budget debates that are going on, a lot of bills, provisos. There's a lot of stuff out there being kicked around regarding working retirees. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, you're all well aware of the educator shortage. We know that the working retirees, as you mentioned, play a very important role, or can play a very important role in many districts to fill those hard to fill positions or areas where we can't find new talent. The second reason that this is getting a lot of attention, as you may remember in recent years, we have brought to you proposals and ideas and plans to finish phasing out the working retiree reduction in pay that exists in the county now. We were doing that because we knew at some point in time, the law that allowed that, the statute, was going to sunset, it was going to go away. So that provision allowing for the reduction in salary below schedule for working retirees was set to expire July 1 of 2020. We got a 1-year extension under the continuing resolution. It was given a waiver, so we continued those through 2021 year. At this point in time, there is, I say, no evidence on the screen. There is some emergency powers that exist in the House version that could continue to allow this. We're being told, we feel that there's minimal chance, because it's already been taken out of the Senate version, there's minimal chance that that'll make it back in. So we are preparing to plan a budget, and we're preparing you for the very likelihood that the 10% reduction that is in place now will be restored to the schedule.
The budget that they are considering now is for 1 year. Give up the $50,000 for retired teachers to come back and work. No company with their retirement or any of that benefit. So that $50,000 that they're considering in the
It will not. Those pieces of legislation or those bills are related to how much they can earn before their retirement benefits are impacted and for what period of time they can be employed.
But our district is considered a critical geographic district. So our folks are not subject even to that 50,000. That is correct. Our employees who come back and teach as a working retiree can work and make their, in fact, what this will do is that if this legislation sunsets like it appears, they will make the top of the scale just like they would have looked. And there is no penalty for teachers.
So I want you to be aware of that. Just a reminder, working retirees from another state, we've never been able to touch their status. We have to honor their certificate from another state. We cannot negotiate that salary below schedule. The statute only applies for those in South Carolina. So what's our makeup? Working retirees, we have 32 certified staff, 14 classified staff that are currently working. And again, just a reminder, anybody who thinks they have the mousetrap that's going to fix this is throwing whatever they can on the table to try to fix the earnings limitation that you're talking about for retirement. There is no fix for the statute going away for the reduction. We really feel like that we no longer have the power to negotiate. But anybody who has a plan to fix the earnings limitation for retirement is throwing it out there. Whether it's number of years, amount they can earn, so you're going to read a lot about it. So, what would be the impact as we look at working retirees? $250,000 would remove the 10% reduction and place all of those folks on schedule. This includes estimated fringe. And that breaks down to be about 210,000 certified, 40,000 classified. And additional working retirees, if someone were to retire after this happens, there's no impact to our future finances because they will already be on schedule. So just a couple of quick reminders of where we stand. EFA, before we get into the expenses and revenues. EFA is the foundational formula. This provides all the additional state aid based on the district's ability to pay. We're currently at an index where we receive 82% state support. And as a reminder, under the current base student cost of $24.89, that gives us about $2,040 that we have to match the remainder. Because of the index tax payability that's reassessed every year, our index is projected to get a little better for the 21-22 years, so we should be receiving 83% state support. I'll urge you, or I'll ask you to not look at the index of tax payability or this change to be only a reflection of poverty. That's a very common mistake. So when we look at the index of tax payability that is analyzed by the Department of Revenue, that is an analysis of the statewide assessed values. And it's a comparison of how assessed values in Chesterfield County stacks up against all the others in the state. So poverty could be a component, but it's a measure of assessed values and how we stack up. So our amount of assessed values ticked down a little bit from the prior index year to this one. So a few things to look at for expenses. This will give you some idea of what you may see on the first reading coming up in a couple of weeks. 2021 retro step that we just talked about, we have to include that in our expenses because it is recurring. That retro step, we already told you, looks to be about $600,000 of cost for all employees. About $325,000 of that funded because those are the ones that are in the mandate, those certified categories. but we'll add that to our expenses because it's recurring. The 21-22 step, we're going ahead and giving you an estimate for all. The cost, because of the retro step, we're benefiting a little bit here because of the impacts of COVID. Because the step had to be retro for 2021, the legislators have now, I won't say forced, but they have chosen to annualize this. So it's a recurring expense that they not only have to fund for the current year, but going into 21-22, they have to fund both. So we stand to get the same amount of funding for the 21-22 step for certified staff as we do for the retro. That is very unusual. Usually we just get the base student cost increase. Good luck with the rest. So we do hope that this will be a benefit. So that step does appear to be a little bit more expensive. Keep in mind, as fringe moves with the salary, things are going to be more expensive. Each of those sales are going to be a little more expensive as we go into the next year, because I promise you the salary schedule will change. Keep in mind, we've got a salary schedule now that's over a year old that has not been adjusted. So it's not a cost of living increase, but it's just what happens during the process. And that also includes our process to add longevity steps. You may recall we suspended that going into the 2021 year, but in the 2 previous years, we had added those longevity steps for classified schedules and other non-certified schedules that were part of that proposal. Fringe costs, this is, again, we're benefiting from some funding that's going to be coming our way that maybe normally would not. Again, 1% retirement increase resumes. We also have a small employer health increase coming our way. So $465,000 should cover the basic fringe increases. This doesn't account for any changes that employees make. But the fact that the majority of that should be funded is a win. And we'll look at that just a minute on the revenue side. That is the only page I have related to expenditures at this time, because we will be looking at other ancillary items, utilities, et cetera, before first reading. But we wanted you to know what the main parts of legislation are, and it is people, it's salaries, it's fringe, it's those mandates. So those are the costly items that we're going to have to take a look at. But let's look at some of the revenue items that may help us out. First one doesn't help us out. Going backwards, $200,000 net, 80 classrooms, EFA, again, the foundational portion of that line. And here's why. It includes the 45th day adjustment. We've already talked about 4K, which is not necessarily included in this, but we like other districts, lost enrollment across most categories due to COVID. Noticeable losses were in kindergarten, primary, elementary, and GT. We expected. But we are getting a little bit of a bump from the index of taxpayability. And there's a little bit of a shift where we're losing about 0.29 of a weighting because we've had to shift some pupil units from CTE to high school. That's not our choice. We just want you to be aware, 2019, the State Department did an audit of CTE classifications across the state, not just us. And it was determined that if a student, for instance, who is in a CTE classroom for a block schedule, so they're only in that for one semester, they're in there for longer periods of time, they get all their credits during the first semester, but they're not enrolled in the CTE class the second semester, they cannot be classified as CTE for the whole year. So they go back to the high school classification. So just something that's having to be done across the state. So we can live with that. We're better than many. So don't get too caught up on a backtrack on that EFA category at this point. Fringe. told you that majority of the fringe will be funded. These are the two categories. We'll be given $350,000 roughly. We hope that'll get a little bit better to cover the 2021 and 21-22 year, and then money for the 1% retirement increase. Tier 3, we've already been given notification that will be increased about $167,000 for 21-22. And that's a pretty good hit. That represents probably over $350,000 over 2 years. Funded mandates, we talked about the steps. The two pots of $325,000 should be funded, so that's our $650,000 that we expect to receive at minimum. These cover the steps for the certified categories for 2 years. And just want to bring your attention to an adjustment that we need to make that we're not worried about, because we didn't need these pots for the 2021 year. We're doing very well without this. Interest rates aren't going to get any better anytime soon, so we need to adjust our expectation on interest earnings for LGIP. And we put in the budget for the 19-20 year that carried to the current year a capital funds transfer that we did not need, and certainly don't need any more now that we have a chance to offset some expenses for things like custodial and facilities. So a few things to look out for. Glad to say that we do reasonably expect some good news from the Senate. We're already hearing maybe $15 increase in base unit cost above the 11. It's not a whole lot, but it helps. We'll have to wait and see which version prevails. We do hope that the Senate version prevails, and want you to be aware that the Senate Finance Committee is proposing a $1,000 increase for all teacher classifications. That is not in the numbers you just saw, but that would be a $1,000 increase to every cell on every teacher salary schedule, and it is funded. It's been $72 million set aside for that. So if all that passes from Senate Finance through the Senate, those will be changes on the salary schedule. Very positive changes, very positive that it's funded. Just so you know, contracts are not due back for another couple of weeks. We know that changes can be made through the May 15th timeframe, so a lot of unknowns there. And we'll, as I said earlier, we'll take a closer look at utilities and other items prior to first reading and go over those when we get back together. I will just go ahead and warn you, or give you the expectation that we will likely need to use at least a budgeted fund balance to get ourselves right as far as a budgeted or a balanced budget prior to June 30th, but we're not yet sure exactly where that will lie. Had 2 very positive years. We hope we can use that to our advantage once we figure out what our starting point is.
Mr. Willard, also in revenue, if you go ahead and address millage and the cap.
Yes. There's still some debate on what the CPI growth number is going to be. I think I have heard Dr. Bill that they're thinking about revising what they have put out as a preliminary number. But based on countywide numbers and based on what the CPI looks like it's going to be, we do not foresee us recommending a millage increase for the 21-22 year based on the statewide percentage. It's pretty low. Anything else related to that? Sure.
No, I just wanted everybody to know going into it that we have not, in our discussions, that's not even been a discussion that we've had just now.
Exactly. And the way the timing is, it's probably a very good thing. Just giving you some dates to remember for the state legislative schedule. Senate debates should be this week, and I think they'll go very quickly based on what's in front of folks. So hopefully we'll have some additional information going at the first reading. And this is our schedule, the first and second reading. And just, feel free to have some discussion with us. If you have questions, we certainly want to have some interaction with you going through the readings and make sure that we're addressing anything that you would like for us to. We do want you to consider the numbers we've shown you this evening. Do we consider extending the 21-22 step to all employee classifications? As we've typically done, with the exception, I think it was 1920, we had one freeze for admin.
We froze admin.
So we would certainly like feedback and consideration going forward for us, extending to all classifications. And we'll certainly give you any concerns to fund that if we have it. At this point, we do not. And please let us know if there's anything else we need to consider for 21-22. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for the 21-22 budget review. I appreciate your time, and certainly will answer any questions. Note any comments if you have. Any questions?
Thank you, Brad, for all the work done putting this together.
No, I would say, this is a very interesting budget year because most of what they are pushing down to us for the first time in my career as superintendent, they're funding the vast majority of what they're pushing to us, as opposed to telling us, you've got to do these things and go figure it out on your own. This has been a very positive process. And if you keep up with Senate Finance Committee last week, Brad, what normally takes hours and hours took 30 minutes.
That was the longest bullet list that was read off in about 25 minutes.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of concurrence to what's going on right now. I hope that carries over into the budget deliberations beginning tomorrow. We'll certainly have the computers up and running and be watching all day and be rattling the cages if we need to rattle.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. If no other business, we're down to the chairman's comments. Our next meeting will be May 10th, here at Government Learning Center at 5:30, executive session starting at 5. There's no other business we have today. I need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say, say aye. All opposed, like sign. Thank you very much.